Welcome to the Enlightened Misfits podcast, a space for spiritual entrepreneurs who refuse to settle for anything less than their purpose. I am your host, Lauren Perlingi. After surviving a near-death experience and being declared gone for 3 minutes, I woke up with a mission to help women turn self-sabotage into self-compassion and fear into fuel. Here, we're going to dive into raw conversations, practical tools, and inspiring stories designed to help you break free from old patterns, claim your voice, and build a business that lights up your soul. If you've ever felt like you don't fit the mold, you're in the right place. This is where Misfits rise into their power. Welcome back to the Enlightened Misfits podcast. I am your host, Lauren Perlingi, and in today's conversation is somebody who has, if you've ever questioned yourself after a relationship, or you felt emotionally drained, or maybe even struggled to trust your inner voice again, I'm joined by Kyle Miller, the founder of Kyle Miller Coaching, whose work is devoted to helping people heal from narcissistic and emotional abuse and rebuild their lives with confidence, clarity, and self-trust. Welcome, Kyle. I'd love for you to start at the beginning, not just of what you do now, but what led you to what you do now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited about the conversation.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I drove truck for a long time, 16 years or so, and so it gave me the opportunity to listen to all kinds of podcasts and audiobooks. And I think, at that point in time, it was driven a lot by feeling a lack of worth. Not believing in myself or feeling deserving or any of those things. And fortunately now I do it because I love to learn. I love to learn more new things. But over 30,000-ish hours of audiobooks and podcasts that I listen to. And through that time also I was in an abusive relationship for 14 years. So that was kind of a lot of what culminated together, and I wanted to do something more. I like driving truck. I like driving, but I wanted something more from my life than just sitting in a truck. So yeah, it was a hard transition to figure out how do I make this transition from pretty good money driving truck to becoming a coach or something else. And so after I got divorced, then I worked for a little while and paid some things off and whatever, and then actually sold my house and quit my job in order to go through coach certification and become a coach. So kind of full send off the cliff there, um, but it wasn't. I never contemplated even thinking about coaching on narcissistic abuse. That was not in the realm of possibility for me when
Right.
when I went in to become a coach, and even after I was a coach, I was kind of a general life coach, and I just kept having little synchronicities happen, and so that and a lot of healing during that time too. Doing the coach certification, I was available all the time, so I got spoiled, and I got to get coached and coach a lot of people that were all in my class during that time because I was the only one that was just available all the time, and so that helped tremendously. And then really from there with just little subtle things that happened, and I went, oh my gosh, is this really what I want to do? And it was the first thing that really touched my heart. I mean, for probably obvious reasons
Right.
that
Yeah.
that I just couldn't see at that time. Um, but it's much more of a mission for me than, I mean, it is a business and I do have to make money and all of that. But if I won $100 million tomorrow, I'd still be doing the same thing that I'm doing, because I absolutely love it, and I love the people that I work with. My clients they are I'm emotional about this because they are the absolute best people that I've ever had the privilege to meet, and they have just gone through hell, and so I get to help them and walk with them through the journey and watch them win in their lives. And I just I can't imagine anything better than that experience. Just messaging with a client this morning, and she had just bought a house and just feels good about her life, and it's just amazing to watch them, walk through from where they are to, succeeding and winning in their lives and feeling good about themselves. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's kind
Yeah.
of
And it's okay to get emotional. Here's me, I have full body chills when I'm hearing you talk because, some of my story, I resonate, having narcissistic
hmm
abuse and emotional
yeah.
abuse. And I think that people listening to this right now, like a lot of people that are listening or watching, which if you're watching, make sure you go check out his background because it's cool. It's moving and it's a galaxy. So if you're watching this or if you're not watching this, go to YouTube and go go look at the video. Um, but yeah, I was saying that, I had full body chills listening to you
Yeah,
because, it's that heart-centered place versus
yeah.
what we see out there in society, the shift that's happening, more like ego-driven business
hmm
entrepreneurs, which, that also feels like the same thing. I've had my own experience of that too, of why do
hmm
I keep hiring narcissistic mentors? And then looking at
Yeah,
myself, like what inside of me still is trying to like
yeah,
self-worth, like why what am I not seeing, so I think that that's really powerful. And if you've been able to walk but like side by side with somebody that
hmm
understands it, it's huge because you're able to hold that space, which is simply what
yeah,
all of us need, is just that
yeah,
we want to be seen and heard. And so I love that you're doing that. So
yeah.
what was like the moment that you realized healing wasn't just about like moving on, but it was like reclaiming yourself? Was this after your divorce? Was this before your divorce? Was it both?
Yeah. Yeah, it was, I mean, it was after I was just a mess of a human when I got divorced. All of it happened within about 6 or 8 months at the end of the
Mhm.
relationship, because I didn't realize until that point that I was in an abusive relationship. So almost 14 years thinking that I was the problem. And it wasn't until the very end, basically, that I really went, wait a minute, maybe I'm not the only problem. But
Yeah.
that, it just felt like my whole life really kind of did fall apart. And I've had multiple more of those because we think that, oh, once we get past the narcissist, then we get to move on with our life. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because usually for most of us, it's all of those other things throughout the whole rest of our lives that led us to where we got into a relationship with a narcissist. And so once we get past the narcissist, then the real work begins, which is, I think, hard for a lot of people to hear. And it's been hard for me to go through that journey myself, because it's like, how many more things do I unlock here and discover that I went through, that led me up to being in relationships with narcissists. So
Yeah. So from that place, what was the aha or like the realization, like once you started to look within, like, because I hear this all the time and I see, you see this all over social media of like, I'm a good girl going after that bad, like that bad
mhm,
guy,
mhm,
or that good guy going after that bad girl. Like, what is
mhm.
it that makes that happen?
I think, for me, it's been so many layers of that, and I'm fortunate. I feel spoiled because I have 20 years of background in personal development. So
Yeah.
I've really trained myself to look within myself, even if I don't see it, whatever the cause issue is, but it's that awareness that, okay, wait a minute. So if these are the people, I mean, I've lately been dating a little bit,
Mhm.
and I was looking around going, oh my gosh, all of these women are avoidant. And
Mm.
and so I was like, okay, hold on a minute here.
Now, are you the
And
anxious? Are you the anxious?
so I am pretty sure that I'm fearful avoidant. Um, so
Okay. Okay.
so yeah, I got the disorganized attachment. I'm think that I'm probably, pretty well secure, until I run into a woman that I might be interested in, and then
Um,
there's probably some work still.
yeah, of
Although
course.
I feel more and more secure in that, but yeah, it was that was the realization. It was like, oh my gosh, all of these avoidant women and avoidant other avoidant people in my life. And I went, okay, what are you avoiding in your life?
Yeah.
And the fact that I'm focused. I mean, that was the focus of my thoughts was all of these avoidant people. Well, of course you're going to bring in avoidant people if you're continuously thinking about avoidant people. And
Right.
and so it's like, okay, I have some mess to clean up a little bit, which is fine. But that was so I think there's been so many layers of that, and it probably took me a year or so to really get stable enough that I could look inside myself,
Yeah.
after the divorce, and lots of counseling, lots of coaching,
Yeah.
but I wasn't. I think I was in probably fight or flight for a long time, and just dissociated as well. So that it took a lot of work for me to get to where I was stable enough to be able to even reflect about anything.
Yeah. And that's a huge part of what healing starts with, or it
Hmm.
that going down that healing journey, because I have also do have a very similar experience when I got divorced.
Hmm.
I didn't even know what a narcissist was. And
Yeah.
then that word came in, and I'm like, what the hell is that? Like, so of course that's on my news feed, and that's like, not news, like my
Yeah.
scrolling, and I'm like,
Yep.
oh shit, I am the problem. Like you said, I I am the problem also. Like I am
Yeah.
the problem and
Yeah.
he is the problem. And
Yep.
then I took a survey of my whole life, and I would remember my parents saying to me, "Why do you always pick bad guys?"
Mm.
And I was like, I don't really know how to answer that. Well, now I know how to answer that, because I would always search for that love that I
Mm.
could
Yep.
get. You say disorganized attachment. I sometimes think I have that, and then sometimes
Hmm.
I think I just have anxious. So it's like,
Yeah.
what I've never was really diagnosed with like that, but from relationship coaches, and it was like I would take the tests and the quizzes, and it's more like you're anxious, which is why I would always
Mm.
attract
Hmm.
avoidant partners. And
Yeah.
I say this, my drug of choice was always relationships. Like that's where
Mm.
I was, always gravitated towards, like not an actual physical drug, but it did the same
Hmm.
thing to my body and my brain that an actual drug would do. And
Yeah.
it's like, I'm not discounting people that have went through addiction. My husband has, healed through addiction.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that, but it's harder, I feel
Yeah.
like, or people that have gone through addiction, that they also have these relationship issues because of what the drugs did, or
Hmm.
what the other people did. And it's harder because it's like, for me, it's codependent, and it's like I have to make sure every single day that I'm not being codependent or
Hmm.
going back into my conditioning. And I think that goes for what you just said too, of like, it always comes out. And I feel like it always will come out. Like that's actually the journey. Like that's actually the work. Like I used to remember hearing myself say, oh, I just want to be in a healthy relationship. Well, now I am in a healthy relationship. And sometimes I'm like, I
Hmm.
wish I could just go, I wish this was just easy, you know?
Yeah.
I wish I
Yeah.
wasn't so aware. And it's like not telling the universe that, but like,
Yeah.
sometimes being more aware and it being like in a healthier relationship is not, it's not as easy. I mean, it's not
Hmm.
easy at all.
Yeah.
It's as easy as we make it. I tell myself that all the time. It's as easy as make it. I know I'm making this harder than it has to be, but like those words and like how you say it, it really matters. So,
Hmm.
being a survivor, like this, even if you're a survivor listening, when people say the abuse, like obviously none of us really knew that we were being abused. Like it was
Yep.
never, it was an awareness. And then here's me, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Like the people that are narcissistic or narcissist or they might not even be aware of what they're doing, or maybe
Mhm.
they are aware, like there is
Yep.
a lot of it's like, oh, he's just not aware. He's stuck in where he was hurt. Or, like
Mhm.
it's coming from that compassionate place with boundaries, obviously, right? But,
Yeah.
it's coming from that perspective. So I would love for you to kind of speak about it from that way. Like how has narcissistic abuse typically shown up emotionally for you or for your clients,
Mhm.
before people recognize it to actually be like questioning, like what's going on here? Like, is this abuse?
I think it's almost a regular thing with most or many of my clients that when they come to me, they wonder if they're the narcissist themselves.
Me too.
Which
That was
which
me.
is yeah, which is that's a good sign for most people. If you are questioning if you are the narcissist, then probably perhaps most likely you are not the narcissist
Right.
because they don't, and I question whether or not, and I'm sure it's different with all of them, but whether or not they're aware or not of what they're
Yeah.
doing or if they're toxic or not. But they are not, they're unwilling to face any of those things. So
Right.
regardless of whether or not they're um, they're aware or not, that is, I mean, that is probably the biggest thing that
Yeah.
they'll never let themselves face, let
Right.
alone ever speak that out loud to anyone else,
Yeah.
because it ruins the illusion.
Right.
So and I wanted to touch on the, I guess, all of the substances and everything else, because really a lot of what we're talking about is being emotionally sober. Which if we are
Right.
not emotionally sober, it's very hard for us to make, good decisions in relationships or anything else.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, they beat themselves up about using whatever different substance or anything else, whether or not it's relationships or sex or all of the different things, which are all coping mechanisms.
Right.
And so when you're going through life, you have a certain amount of capacity. And so once you reach that capacity, especially with the all of the emotional stuff, then everything above your capacity is a coping mechanism of some sort. And
Yeah.
it's really good that we have those things because it allows us to continue to survive. And so these are, that's when you get into survival mode, is when you reach your capacity. And so I think, looking at that as because people can say, you should use this or that or anything else as far as your coping mechanism. But the reality is you use whatever coping mechanism is that works for you. And that's why we use those. So yes, it's great, for us to not drink too much or or use whatever substance, whatever it is, or relationships, anything else. Yes, there are better coping mechanisms, and that's great, except for the fact that if we haven't learned how to make those work for us, then we're still going to be using the other ones, or we're going to try to basically force of will our way through it. And especially when you're over capacity and you're in survival mode, it is so incredibly difficult for you to try and force of will your way through. I need to use, I'm going to start using mindfulness and yoga and whatever, even though I've never done that. And it doesn't, I don't really know how to do all of that. I need to use that now because everybody says that drinking too much is a terrible thing and I shouldn't do that. And I'm not advocating for the drinking, but with all of the different things, um, it's not a big deal. And I think that's one thing that most people don't want to say. If you drank too much, okay, or you got into another relationship or whatever it is, it's all fine. And and okay, maybe it's not what we want to continue to do, but I think there's a compassion piece that is very hard for most people to really accept. And so it's a big part of what I do with my clients. Whatever it is that you did is fine and it's okay. Maybe we
Right.
don't want to continue to do that in the
Right.
future, and we can talk about all of that without the shame and judgment, though, because
Yeah.
it doesn't, that just pushes us right back into survival, up over our capacity, and then we go right back to all of those coping mechanisms that we were using before.
Yeah. I love how that you said that about being at capacity, because I feel
Hmm.
like when you're in it or you can't see it or you don't have
Yeah.
somebody like your shadow, let's just call it your shadow. It's your shadow for a reason, right? Like you don't see your shadow. It's
Yeah.
behind you. Like you're not supposed to see your shadow, you know? So it's like having that person that you trust, or, if they would work with you or, your clients,
Hmm.
um, you be able to gently help them. It's
Yeah.
not like you're going to, you know, I always say that I'm very gentle with my clients too, because,
Hmm.
wherever their ego is or wherever like their limiting belief or whatever it is, I've noticed that I have to be very gentle.
Hmm.
Um, just knowing the experience of like, that ego is going to come, especially if these people are
Yeah.
in survival mode. It's like,
Yep.
I have to just say it with love. It's like I always,
Hmm.
I say this a lot. Like I say this with love, and I'm going to say this
Hmm.
very gently, but let me give
Yeah.
you a gentle reminder. I think that that keeps the ego kind of like, okay, she's not yelling at us, like,
Yes. Yeah.
and I think that
Yeah.
that's what you kind of like how I like the way that you said about at capacity, and it's a really good way to like look at it that way. Like looking at it from that like at that perspective
Hmm.
is, if you have a bad habit or something like that,
Hmm.
or you keep getting into these relationships. Like the question I would always ask myself is like, what part of me thinks I deserve this? Like if I'm
Yeah.
if it's emotional, or
Hmm.
am I indulging too much in this? Am I scrolling too much on social
Hmm.
media? And do I like, it's more of like that. What am I doing? Like if the reality, like you said earlier about
Yeah.
like, if you don't like your reality, you can change it too. So,
Mm.
and I think this comes to like my next question that I want to ask you is like, there's a lot of people, that leave these relationships feeling like confused, maybe
Hmm.
anxious, maybe disconnected from themselves. Like what emotionally is happening, or maybe even neurologically happening during narcissistic abuse that creates this effect?
I think a lot of it is like a drug withdrawal. As much as we don't want to be in those abusive relationships, we're looking for a need that we get from those relationships. And so one of the things that we get is we get, I mean, it's the intermittent reinforcement with so many of them. So it's, I mean, it's just like a gambling addiction, because it really kind of is. We're just looking for the love, or the connection, or however you want to look at that. And so we try to get that over and over, and it's like we hang on to those little moments, and that's what keeps us in the relationship, because if it was terrible all the time, then we would leave. But we get that little bit of intermittent reinforcement, and that's what keeps us there. And so when we leave, it just feels awful all the time. We're not getting the intermittent reinforcement. So it feels awful all the time. And usually everything is calm. If we get out of the relationship and we're just by ourselves, it's much more important to be with yourself than by yourself.
Right.
But when we get out, everything is just calm, and that's when all the emotions come up. And so I mean, just being free of a toxic relationship, um, when you're in those relationships, there's so much toxic, just, I mean, drama and chaos and all of the things, which
Yeah.
helps to suppress a lot of the emotional stuff.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it's kind of self-reinforcing. This is going to feel awful all the time, and everything's going to be stable when I get out of this relationship, which means that even more of all of those emotions that have been sort of, depressed or suppressed or pushed away because of the drama and chaos, they're all going to come to surface. So and we're losing somebody that we cared about.
Yeah.
I mean, whether or not they're horrible, abusive, all of those things, this is a person that we care about. And so we go through the grief of that. But it's multiple layers of grief, because it's not just the grief of losing the person, it's losing the person, the connection, it's losing the illusion of who we thought we had and the
Right.
life that we thought we had. And there's many more layers of grief. So it's not like, oh, well, I don't have this person in my life anymore. It's so many more layers than that, and you're having all of the realization. Most of the abuse we don't see, we don't understand until we're out of the relationship. So I mean, it just sends us off the rails when we get out of these relationships, because we're hit with all of the things that we just didn't really have the space to feel in the relationship.
Yeah. And I think that when you said about the drama and chaos, the quote that came to my mind, or like the saying that I heard, I don't even know who to credit this to, but um when, they say peace feels like boredom when you grew up in chaos. And
Yeah.
I think that a lot of this comes from our childhood of
Yep.
it came from mom or dad, like,
Yep.
or mom not being there or dad not being there, or like emotionally.
Yeah.
And when I started to kind of get out of, I call it the drama triangle. I
Yeah.
think it's called the trauma triangle, but I call it
Yeah.
drama triangle of like being the perpetrator, being the hero, being the
Hmm.
victim, like that
Yep.
whole thing. And I realized, oh, I can get out of this. And I think it's really important too, because it's like that victim game, and all of us play into it.
Yeah.
Like every
Yep.
single one of us, even when you try to blame yourself for doing something, or
Mhm.
like you're still playing in that, like that game. So it's like that awareness. After I learned about that a couple years ago, I was thinking, I always like, am I trying to say I'm a victim? Oh, poor me, like, and it could
Mhm.
just be any situation of like, well, that wasn't fair. And it's more of like, um, what lesson has this taught me? And it, like, listening to you, it's like coming now, I guess it's been 5 years. I've been divorced. It has
Mm.
been 5 years, 6 years. And, I still have to have communication with my ex because he's
Oh.
my kid's father.
Mhm.
So, it's very boundary oriented, but,
Mhm.
it just opened up communication to the last year. And
Mhm.
it's like, I now gave myself that space. Long story short, there's, people listening to this probably can resonate with this, because I think that there's a lot of people in this space too, because they play into this victim of like, I
Mhm.
played that victim card a lot
Mhm.
before, because then I was just protecting my kid. And, it's
Mhm.
like you have to learn boundaries. I didn't know what boundaries were either. Apparently, they're
Yeah.
really important, because if I want my peace, I need to have boundaries.
Yeah.
So it's like, but then every level, like you said, every, layer, there's boundaries. Like you have to
Mhm.
have boundaries. So, like, can you kind of speak a little bit about maybe boundaries with yourself? I feel like the biggest
Yeah.
struggle that I probably see with survivors is self-doubt. So, like, what are
Mhm.
some tangible boundaries that, if it's a lack of identity, or maybe, this specific person is attacking their intuition or something like that? What is like a boundary that they can place or learn about so they can not have this self-doubt?
Yeah. And I think the first thing that I want to say too about boundaries is that with all of us that don't have or haven't had boundaries, um,
Right.
people that have good solid boundaries, they seem really harsh and cold when and I think back to so many people that I was like, oh my gosh, why are they not, they don't seem nice.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that's not necessarily accurate, because they have good boundaries. And the way that I think about boundaries, especially with myself, is it's I think in a lot of ways, I go to an analogy of a child, like a toddler with a healthy parent, and we will say specifically with a healthy parent. And
Yeah.
so I mean, toddlers sometimes they're throwing a fit. I mean, they're throwing fists, and what we don't do, what a healthy parent does not do, is they
Yeah.
don't then hit their child back. They don't, they don't do anything other than, hey, whoa, that's enough. That's enough. And I do that with myself. That voice comes up and I start bludgeoning myself. And I'm like,
Right.
whoa, hey, that's enough. That's enough. And because we can't beat ourselves into being kind to ourselves. Most of all of this whole game of healing and working through things, it's all a game of allowing. And and it's
Mhm.
very much like when you hug someone and they hug you back, you have to allow yourself to be hugged by them, and they have to allow you to hug them. And and this is what it feels like with allowing the emotions with, and in a lot of ways it's like, okay, hold on, that's enough. And then we can then allow ourselves to feel the emotions, allow ourselves to be kind to ourselves. But this is a process and it's a practice. And it's not I mean, you're gonna mess it up. I mess it up. I don't think there's anybody that doesn't mess it up.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably one of the biggest boundaries, because I see most everybody beats themselves up, in some way or form. And so that is probably the most important boundary that you can work on.
Yeah.
Because it's not, I say work on because it's a process and a practice. And so it's every day. But I think that's probably one of the most important boundaries. And then, looking at the areas, where you're not taking as much care of yourself as you want, and that is neglecting ourselves is a regular thing, because we've been trained and programmed to take care of everyone else, because if we didn't, we got shamed and judged and abused probably. And so we have to really learn how to take care of ourselves and not neglect ourselves. And so that's it kind of comes into boundaries with other people, but also boundaries with ourselves. No, I'm not going to go take on this other extra thing. I'm not going to go do this extra other thing. And which is a boundary.
Right.
And there's a lot of people, especially if we've been the people pleasers and taking care of everyone
Yeah.
else,
Yeah.
they're probably going to be upset about that.
Mhm.
But that is a boundary for us, even though it seems like we're putting this on other people. And in some ways, we put boundaries up, with other people, but that's really a boundary with ourselves, that we're not going to go take on extra things, which then overwhelm us, which run us down, and then we're back into fight or flight or survival mode.
Right. Yeah, it's been a fun journey with boundaries,
Yeah.
especially, my daughter, she'll be 6
Mm.
next week. And she's like the biggest role model and the biggest like of where I need to strengthen boundaries, or, she's constantly trying to teach me, I
Hmm.
should say, boundaries,
Hmm.
because I'm like, mommy needs a second. Mommy needs she
Yeah.
can count to 60. I'm like, mommy needs 2 minutes, count to 60 twice. And she counts out loud, which is whatever. Like I can walk away. But it's like I'm
Hmm.
allowed to say that. Like I'm
Yeah.
allowed to, because of, my own triggers, and, realizing that I'm not going to hit my daughter when she's screaming and punching and yelling
Yeah.
and screaming at me, but I need to calm
Hmm.
myself down so she can calm down. Because if I'm
Yep.
not calm, she's not going to be calm. So it's
Yep.
like, or like the discipline, or it's like, talk about, kids nowadays don't know what consequences are. And it's like,
Hmm.
and I also believe that too. It's like because our consequences from our generation we got punished for having big emotions. It's like
Yeah.
that's not what I'm punishing my daughter for.
Yep.
However, she is 6, or going to be 6, 5. She understands that hitting is not okay. Like we don't
Yep.
hit. And it's like, again, it was more of like an attention seeking thing. We went to
Hmm.
therapy for it because I seen it.
Yeah.
Like she wasn't able to tell me that. So
Yep.
therapy was for me. It wasn't for her. It was for me how I can parent her because I didn't know, like I
Yeah.
didn't, I didn't have this as a child like, when I was a kid. So it's like, how do I can't deal with my own emotions. How am I going to deal with hers? So it's like, it's been a journey. And now it's like, I can see how conscious parenting or gentle parenting, most people say, well, my kid's not gentle. I don't think any kid is gentle. They're not supposed to be. You need to teach them how to deal with their emotions.
Yeah.
But it's coming
Yeah.
from a place of like, I don't know how to deal with now I do, but I
Yeah.
didn't 5 years ago. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't know, like, I felt like I was just always angry and
Yeah.
realizing that that was because of, like, I would feel depressed. And it was like, oh,
Hmm.
depression just means I'm suppressing my emotions. Or, anxiety just simply means that I'm worrying about something in the future that I can't control. It's like those
Hmm.
basic things I think is huge. And it comes to like boundaries, you're allowed to say no. Like, no is a
Hmm.
complete sentence. And when somebody taught me that,
Yes.
I was like, I can literally say no, period, and not explain why I'm telling you
Yeah.
no. Like over
Yeah.
explaining. I've learned that this year too, as like self-abandonment. I'm still abandoning myself when I'm
Hmm.
oversharing, I'm over explaining, I'm saying too much. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
I've noticed too with my, business boundaries. Boundaries are shown in
Hmm.
my business too, of like, I need to just say no when I need to say no and not really care about how they feel. Obviously
Yeah.
with love. I'm going to say it with
Yeah.
love. I'm not going to do it intentionally, like just to hurt their feelings. But I think, like you said, when you have boundaries, you think that this person's harsh.
Yeah.
I get it. I
Yeah.
resonate with that because I'm like, they told me no. They don't care, like, but now it's because I'm like, well, I want to
Mhm.
have boundaries like them because
Yeah.
they're protecting their peace. And I think that that is truly, truly important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, and it's such an important thing, which I think most parents they struggle with, especially if they've been in abusive relationships.
Mhm.
One of the things, I don't have time. I don't have time for myself. I can't take time for myself. My
Mhm.
kids are always there. I'm always, whatever's going on.
Yeah.
And that one I push back hard on because what you're teaching your kids is that it's okay for you to never take time for yourself. And that one's a hard one. It's not to throw shame and judgment on people, but just realize when you take time for yourself, you're teaching your kids through your actions that it's okay for them to take time for themselves as well. And that is such a huge learning, which also because we feel selfish when we take time for ourselves and are not giving to our kids or a spouse or whoever else it is. But what you're doing is you're normalizing and giving them permission as well. And
Yeah.
everything gets better in your life and for them, because what we don't want to teach them, what we intend to not teach our kids, is that you need to give up everything for everybody all the time. But a lot of times through our actions, that's exactly what we teach them. And so taking that time saying, nope, right now, I mean, if I have to go lock myself in the bathroom, I'm going to take time for me, and it's okay. I'll be back. You can reassure them and you can take however much time, whatever the time is that you feel that you can do. But the more that you do that, the more that they will go, "Oh, okay. That's okay." And then they will start to also do that for themselves. Nope,
Right.
I need a minute. I need a minute, mom. I
Yeah.
need time for me, which
Yeah.
is, oh, it's like one of the most wonderful things that you can see is when your child says, "I need a minute for me," and
Yeah.
they go take that minute for themselves, which is, yeah, ultimately, I mean, us teaching them and helping them to become their own human and
Yeah.
without all of the outside influences.
Yeah. I was going to say, I can vouch for what you just said because since I've been doing this practice that you just
Hmm.
described, my daughter Now, I do know that she does this just to get me out because she's not wanting to do what I'm asking her to do. But I will respect her. Like, if she
Yeah,
doesn't want to hug or kiss, don't touch me. Okay, that's fine. And like, I'm
yeah,
not showing any like, I don't, sometimes I'm like,
yeah.
God, you don't want me? Okay, fine. Like, I can go. But then it's like, Mommy, I'm like, that wasn't even a minute. But yeah, she'll say,
Yeah.
I need a minute, or she'll go in her room, or
Mm,
she'll be like, I need space. That's a new thing that she says, I need
yeah.
space, which is fine. However, it's mainly sometimes around what I'm asking her to do something like, get ready for dance. Lily, you got to put your dance, we got to get ready for dance. And she goes, okay, I need a minute. I'll do it myself. And it's like, I give her time. And then I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
it's been 20 minutes, Lily. What are you doing? And she's like playing in her room. Like, she's not putting her dance stuff on.
Yeah.
So it's like, but yeah, like in a time that gets triggered and she is mad or angry of like not wanting something that she wants, I'm just
Hmm.
very calmly saying, it's okay, you can feel sad. It's okay.
Hmm.
And she'll be like, I'm
Yeah.
mad at you. You're a bad mommy. Like she's said that before too, which is again,
Yeah.
she's just wanting my reaction. And if I'm not giving that to her, and
Yeah.
she doesn't do that anymore. Like she won't say
Yep.
any of that stuff, but she's tried it. I
Yep.
remember trying it, so I get it. I always
Yep.
remind her, Lauren, or I say, Lily, mommy used to be a kid too, and she's done
Hmm.
everything that you've tried to do. You
Yeah.
know, I don't,
Yeah.
you might not know that, but I was a kid too. I was not always an adult. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also, and this is probably one of the hardest things because especially with the time and getting things done and getting
Yeah.
ready to go do things,
Yeah.
that I think there are times, maybe more times than we would like, that we need to allow them to fail. And
Hmm.
and that one is, it is brutality for us to do that.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, you want to do this on your own, you want to get it done, and you're not ready. And so we're going to be late, or we're going to, and what is the reason that you were late? Well, because I allowed her to get ready herself. And so
Yeah.
we were late as a result of her not getting ready herself. Which is, and I know it's a tricky one because what you don't want to do is shame and judge them and put blame on them, but also at the same time allow them to fail in whatever thing it is that they're doing, because that experience, I mean, we can we can kindly, push them, force them, control them in ways to get
Right.
them to go do whatever it is, but it's not sustainable over the long term, because then
Right.
then they just learn, well, I have to have, why is it you don't go to the gym, 20s, 30s, whatever, oh, well, I need somebody to go with me so that I can go to the gym.
Right.
And that's so much comes back to childhood, where it's like, I know my mom is going to remind me 42 times and really push me to do that. And then we wonder why we can't get ourselves to go do anything when we grow up, when we're adults, and now we need to, wait a minute, is there somebody here there has to be somebody that's going to tell me that I need to go do the thing, and
Right.
there's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. I mean, granted, I have to say that my mom will sometimes remind me, and God love her, like grateful for her,
Hmm.
but sometimes literally, I'm living that same thing of like, now I'm the mom that has to remind,
Yeah.
like that has
Yeah.
to remind my kid. So
Yeah.
I tried that too. And I want to tell you that I heard this from her therapist, and, I believe I'm like, she's always going to be in therapy for her emotions. I want her to be so emotionally
Yeah.
clear that like I don't want her to have to repeat any of the things that maybe I have done wrong or I maybe have messed up on,
Hmm.
like through, her
Yeah.
early stages, 5, 6, because I learned stuff about myself all day. I'm like, I'm used to be a yeller. So, and I'm like, this is creating her to shut down, like I could
Hmm.
feel it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
why am I yelling? Now, I will yell if it's like she's running in the street to yell at
Oh, yeah.
her immediate
Yep.
danger or
Yep.
something like that. But like, if it's just because I can't control my own self, I'm walking away because I'm like, I just now it's like I don't even have the energy to do this. Like,
Yeah.
now that it
Yeah.
shifted into that. But um, specifically, she didn't remember her jacket one day, and I reminded her, and I reminded her at probably 40 times. And I
Hmm.
was like, I'm going to teach her a lesson. And we
Hmm.
get to school. Now I had to explain to her teacher why she didn't have her jacket. And they looked at me sideways, but I said, no, she's going to learn that she's responsible for mine her jacket because she kept, leaving her gloves and
Yep.
hat at school. And they told her it's her responsibility. So I was like, now I'm going to use that. So now
Mhm.
she makes sure she puts her jacket on before we leave the house. And I don't have to remind her because she knows in her mind, she goes, this is
Yep.
my responsibility. And I'll say that to her. I mean, she is in kindergarten. There's a lot of things that
Yeah.
she's learning and stuff.
Yep.
But
Yep.
her therapist said one day, stop being the hero. And I was like, oh, here's
Mhm.
a drama triangle. And I was like, okay, fine, I won't. And I was like, I won't. And then she goes, well, I'm cold,
Yeah.
mommy. I said, well, next time you should have remembered your jacket. And I think in
Yeah.
that moment,
Yep.
she realized, oh, I got to remember my jacket because it's those things. Now,
Yep.
did I feel bad for her? Sure. Did she not
Hmm.
allowed to go outside for recess because she didn't have her jacket? Yeah. And that's where
Hmm. Yep.
she, of course, that shame. I was like, and I don't feel bad because she doesn't go outside for recess. Maybe that will be her lesson is more
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
regulating herself and, helping with that emotional regulation of like,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, and those things seem so devastating to us as parents because
yeah,
all of those, oh my gosh, this experience or that or whatever it is,
yeah,
which in the grand scheme of things, those are so insignificant compared to all of the things that they will go through in life if they don't learn how to do that for themselves.
right,
Because that is, ooh, that is, it is brutal when you become an adult all of a sudden. Then
right,
then then it's like, oh wow, I just, because I never learned to take responsibility for myself. Now I just blew up my car because I didn't realize that I need to actually check my oil because nobody else is around to do that. And
right,
so it is. I mean, it just, it leads on. So as devastating as it seems, you literally could be saving them 20 or $50,000 as an adult,
right.
or more money, just because of them just taking responsibility for their own lives.
Right. Yeah. And I know it was very simple of like me saying that about her jacket, but I was
Yeah.
like, the therapist said stop being her hero. And
Yep.
if it's something that's not going to keep her, like put her in immediate danger, which it's not,
Hmm.
she's cold. She
Yeah.
can get a
Yeah.
recess. And in
Yep.
a 5-year-old's perspective is a huge thing. We can't
Yeah.
get a recess. What? I can't play outside. My mom forgot my jacket. And then, her school's
Hmm.
very positive for force, like very
Hmm.
conscious, like in that space. So they're like, no, you forgot your jacket. Mommy told you to. How many times? And I was like, you don't even want to know how many times. We're not even going to go there.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's like,
Yeah.
it's just, teaching that. And it's like
Yeah.
now, then having that, oh, Lily's doing this, Lily's doing that, like, the behaviors in school and stuff. Like,
Hmm.
I haven't had got to that point, but it was getting to that point, especially because of the
Hmm.
dynamic between me and her father. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
my husband is her like she has a bonus dad and he's the
Yeah.
one that's present physically, financially, emotionally, mentally, like all of that for her.
Hmm.
So she's really lucky to have
Yeah.
that. But during that dynamic, can you kind of speak about that too? Is like if there's the family is like split and
Yeah.
maybe they do have two healthy parents on one side, but then they still have the other toxic
Hmm.
parent. Like when you see that in, and I'm sure you see this in your clients,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
uncommon, unfortunately. Like what does that look like? Does that keep the people stuck in survival mode? Maybe does it help? Like how does that
Hmm.
affect the children? What can you do as the healing, healthy parent, healthier parent healing, I should
Hmm.
say? Like what are some things that you help your clients through those shifts?
I think the biggest thing, which is it is maybe helpful and it's not helpful also.
Hmm.
It the biggest thing that we can all do is be emotionally regulated and emotionally sober ourselves. And because we cannot think of any creative whatever way to handle any of these things without us being stable ourselves.
Right.
So it's like, how do I, oh my gosh, how do I help my kids through this? They're dysregulated every time they come back from, from my ex-partner's house. And so then I have to clean up the mess, which is accurate, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And really, I don't have a lot more to say about that other than it just sucks and we don't deserve it, and it's awful. And it also is in many ways, in many situations, just the way that it is. And so
Right.
we really have to, in a lot of ways, counter parent, because
Yeah.
they're going to, which means in some ways us being a little bit more harsh, even though it's not being harsh actually,
Yeah.
but holding those boundaries and letting them throw fits and scream and holler and whatever it is, because we're not giving in on whatever the boundary is and the expectations. And so, but it's very hard for you to do any of that if you're not emotionally regulated. And so
Yeah.
that is the most important thing. And I think that's that's one of those things that even if it takes them a long time to pick up on, they will really start to see and really embrace that, oh, this parent is, they're always there for me. They're always consistent. They're
Yeah.
always secure. Even though, and it's a good sign in a lot of ways when your kids are throwing a fit and screaming and hollering and whatever it is. Not that we want that, but
Right.
they feel safe enough to be able to do that, because with a toxic controlling parent, they're not going to do that, because I mean they might maybe, but not all the time. And it's not because they feel safe doing it. It's because they've gotten to the end, and it's like, this is what I have to do at this point, essentially.
Right.
But with the safe, healthy parent, they're gonna throw more fits. They're gonna
Yeah.
do more things. They're gonna push your boundaries. They're gonna do all of the things to you, which sucks. But but it's also because they feel safe enough to have all of that stuff come out. And it needs to come out because they can't let it out with the toxic parent. They can't,
Right.
they don't feel safe. And even if they're physically safe, there is a felt safety. And so for also for anybody that's, I can't leave right now because I need to be there and try to keep them safe from the other parent, so I can't leave the relationship.
Right.
And what that does, unfortunately, is that never gives them a space where they can ever have felt safety, because even if the toxic person is gone to work, on vacation, traveling, doesn't matter, and they're not home, they don't feel safe in that environment. They never
Mm.
have felt safety in that environment. Whereas if you split up, okay, it sucks, that they go to that parent and they don't feel safe there, but they come home to you and they have that felt safety, which is also one of the reasons. I mean, just like when we get out of a relationship, we all of a sudden, all of the emotions, all of the things come up and it feels like everything fell apart. Well, we all of a sudden have felt safety, or a level of that at least. And so then that's when all the emotions come up, because they don't come up when we're not safe. When we are being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, which is what our mind thinks is happening in
Right.
all of these things,
Right.
then we don't do anything other than escape the saber-toothed tiger. And
Right.
so that's how our nervous systems, that's how our emotions feel in all of those situations when we don't have felt safety. And so it's why it's so important. But what you can really do as the parent is just work on yourself. And yeah, hold the boundaries for your kids. But don't try to suppress all of whatever it is that they're doing. Whoa, stop screaming, and all of, like, we try to control that.
Right.
And what they need is to get all that stuff out. Now you can work on all of the you're it's okay for you to go scream and throw a fit. You can go to your room, you can go do that. It's totally fine. What you can't do is come in here and throw things and break things, and that's not a that's a it's a healthy boundary,
Right.
that we can set, but it gives them a space to allow them to get all that stuff out that needs to come out.
Right. Yeah. I just was thinking of it, like when you said that, my daughter, for whatever reason, just had a meltdown. She was getting a bath, just had a meltdown, and she was just screaming. And I'm in the middle of giving her a bath, and she's just screaming. And I'm just
Mhm.
continuing to wash her hair. I'm like, and I'm
Yep.
just like, it's okay. Like, and she's just
Mm.
screaming and screaming. And like, and then finally, she's really good at self-regulation. Like but she has
Mhm.
to, she just, screams, screams,
Yeah.
screams, like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, do you want to talk about it? And she goes, no, I just want you to leave me alone. And I'm thinking, well, I have to get the shampoo out of your hair. And, so then I'm like, well, fine, I won't touch you. And, she's like, get the shampoo out of my hair. But then she's in between screaming. And I don't know what actually happened. I'm not really even sure. She just normally asks for a hug when she gets done doing all of
Oh,
that.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, mommy, and then later on, she will come to me and say, I don't even know. Like she just said that she got yelled. One of the girls, a girl at school was mean to her or something like that. It's probably because
Mm.
Lily didn't get
Mhm.
her way or Lily likes to control things,
Mhm. Mhm.
So it was something like that, or like her teacher didn't walk to her into school or something like that.
Yeah.
Like it was that. And I was like, oh, okay. And then it's like, no big deal. That wasn't a big deal. And she goes, no. And it was just like we didn't make a big deal
Mm.
about it. But
Mhm.
I guess before I'm thinking, oh God, if I did this when I was a kid, or like before I knew about this, my mom would be like, stop screaming, or I
Yep.
would be like, stop screaming because like you're messing up my nervous
Yeah.
system, like it's
Yep.
just, it doesn't feel good. I feel like I was like vibrating,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
was just there. And same thing with like, I think it's healthy too when you were saying about it sucks to, them to be dysregulated and regulate, like,
Mhm.
it's a whole counter parent
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
I've noticed that I placed my ex-husband or her dad in a way of like, your role is
Mhm.
your role, and
Mhm.
you are the father, but
Mhm.
it's like you're not here to teach her any of that stuff. You're just here to, I don't really know what your role is, but she
Yeah.
has started to ask questions,
Mm.
through
Mm.
um because I left early enough that she never even seen us together. So there was a period of time
Mm.
that she thought I didn't know her dad, which was funny. I'm like, I used to be married to him, but okay. Like it was funny.
Yeah.
Like then she started playing both sides. She would tell me something and then she would tell him something. So finally,
Mm.
when there was an open communication, I said all of this stuff and he goes, absolutely not. That never even happened. And I was like,
Mm.
daughter has traits like us. I'm like, oh my God,
Mhm.
like, but it was like the awareness of, I said, I can call your dad if I want to right now and ask if this happened. And then she'll be like, I'm just
Mhm.
kidding. So I'm starting to
Mm.
notice
Yeah.
both of our traits are
Yeah.
ancestral, like generational,
Yep.
are coming into her too. And she's, testing both of our boundaries. And,
Yeah.
like he's not as far along as, like consciously, I should say, or aware, but it seems to be
Mhm.
now through all of this that maybe he's pretending to be wanting to learn or more aware,
Mhm.
but I never thought this would come to this place, but
Mm.
there's some certain, he might just be saying this intuitively. He might just
Yeah.
be saying that too, but he has started more focused on how can we do this for Lily? Because it doesn't matter about me anymore. Like, I don't
Mhm.
care. I'm past that, like
Yeah.
her focus is Lily. And I think that that is really important because I wasn't at a place I blamed him for everything. It was his fault. Everything was his
Yeah.
fault
Yeah.
until I remembered that framing it as like forgiving myself, not forgetting,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
so can you, before we wrap up, can you kind of speak about like what does the real emotional healing look like from survivors that, are in this place maybe that they need to forgive
Hmm.
and not necessarily forget,
Yeah.
but, forgiving it, like letting it go.
Yeah. I think the first thing is this is going to be a roller coaster beyond what you could even comprehend. That's what healing looks like, and sometimes we are just really holding on and hoping we don't get thrown out, and sometimes we get thrown out of the roller coaster. And so it is, I mean, it just that is just the process. So when you start into it, just know that you might get thrown out of the roller coaster, and that's the way it is going to be. um, but I think really we will, what it looks like for a lot of people is we work through things, we realize, we recognize, process and release it, and a lot of what that really looks like um, is you have to understand it, what happened, in a way that makes sense in your mind. And I can also give advice as far as anybody that you talk to. If they are telling you that you don't get it and that you should be able to get this, then they suck. um, because because really, um, if a client doesn't understand, then that means that I didn't say that in a way or describe it or help them in a way that it made sense in their mind. And that's what actually has to happen. Everything has to make sense to us in our minds. And so as that happens, then we're able to let go of more of those things. And there is, of course, the emotional component of that. But a lot of it is making sense of what happened, and allowing all of the emotions to come up around that. Because if we don't really fully feel all of those emotions, and a lot of times we'll let it come up a little bit and then we'll push it away, and it's like, oh, I'm feeling my emotions. No. That is I mean, feeling your emotions is like, sitting in a mud pit, and
Yep.
and not trying to get out of it. You're just sitting in it and going, wow, this feels really awful. And and I don't like this. I mean, it's like with some relatives that you may love, and you love them and you care about them, and they want to hug you and you really don't want to hug them. And you still go hug them anyway. And that's kind of what some of those emotions that we don't want to feel like, is going in and you hug them anyway. And and so but I think it's a major roller coaster, and you'll get to the point where everything feels good. I feel great. Things are going well in my life, and then it's going to go off the rails, because that's when all of those emotions start to surface that you weren't, it was just below your awareness. And when everything clears up and you feel good and life is going well, that's when the other emotions are going to come up. And so it's going to feel like you're going backwards. That's one of the regular things that everybody tells me. "Ah, I'm going backwards. I'm losing progress. All of the things that I learned aren't working." And that's not actually accurate. It is, you're continuing to allow more things to surface, and the more stable we get, the more of those things continue to surface, and that's really kind of the basics of what it looks like. Is if we get stable and then we go right back into chaos, and we try to avoid it, we try to suppress it, we use coping mechanisms, and then, okay, then we allow that, and we work through those things, and then we get feeling really good again, and then everything goes off the rails again. And and I think the the one of the biggest things that happens, especially when you work with somebody that's really good, that knows what they're doing, they will help you to process and work through things so that it gives you space in your capacity. And
Yeah.
so the biggest, and the other thing is when you allow those emotions to come up, you're helping train yourself how to increase your capacity. And so the big thing that we want is we want more capacity, as much capacity as we can have, and we want to be using as little of that capacity as we possibly can. Because then when something goes really sideways in your life, it's not a big deal because you have that much capacity and you don't run over your capacity, because every time we run over capacity, we're using coping mechanisms of whatever kind. That's the way it is. I would love for it to be different, but that is the reality. So, which is why I also say, don't beat yourself up. Like, okay, yeah, we maybe don't want to use those unhealthy coping mechanisms, whatever they are, but when we run over capacity, we have to use something, do
Right.
something. It is literally, we are in survival mode at that time. And you're probably going to have that happen because most of us that come out of those relationships, we're at or above our capacity already. And so,
Right.
so as we begin working through and letting go of those things, we will reduce the amount of capacity we're using, which is great. But then when those next emotions come up, yeah, probably, especially in the beginning, it's going to run you over capacity again.
Right.
And that's normal. Like, all of this is just the normal part of the process, and it feels chaotic, and it feels like you make progress and then you go backwards. And the other thing that I will say too, and I don't know if this is true for everyone, but it seems for me and for a lot of my clients, that there are times when you need to wallow in your misery and you need to feel sorry for yourself and you need to feel like the whole world is coming apart, and that is part of the process. As far as I've seen and I
Yeah.
understand at this point, which is, I'm not working through this. I might be using all kinds of unhealthy coping mechanisms. I'm not making any progress. It feels like I'm going backwards, and it feels like I'm back to all of my habits and everything else, and I feel bad for myself, and I shut down, and I don't want to see anybody or talk to anybody, and I especially don't want help from anyone else. And that, as far as I can see, that is just part of the process of working through all of this, and it's normal.
Yeah, I feel like that's very powerful what you just said, because I was literally going to ask you about that. Like, if if there's some person, or like if you're just like, I need to just feel it. Because I feel
Hmm.
like, you have to feel it to heal it, but
Yeah.
it's feeling it at your own time, right?
Yep.
Because I can
Yep.
definitely resonate with that. Like, there's things that I've gone through or continue to go through, and it's like, I
Hmm.
know I can ask for help, or I know who to ask for help.
Hmm.
But I just need to feel it, because
Hmm.
if I'm not feeling this, I'm going to push it away. I'm going to suppress it. It's going to come
Yeah.
back up at the wrong, inconvenient time.
Yep.
And it's like, that's just how my life
Yeah.
goes. And it's
Yeah.
like, I don't want to do that anymore. That's probably an unhealthy, like, it's an
Well, it's
unhealthy coping mechanism. So it's
yeah,
normal.
and I think it's the reason I talk about allowing so much is we can't force ourselves to
Right.
feel those things. We
Yeah.
have to allow all of those things. And so if you're not in a situation for any reason that you can allow that to surface, then it ain't going to surface yet. I mean, you cannot force it out. You can't beat it out of yourself. You
Right.
you have to be in the space, in the time, whatever time that is for you, which will be
Yeah.
very different than everyone else, and you get to allow that to come up as it does, when it does, in your way, in your time, and it
Yeah.
just really doesn't happen any other way.
Yeah. So if you didn't get anything else from this very powerful conversation, allowing is what you need
Yeah.
to do. Like, your body, it
Yeah.
has to soften. You have trust the awareness. Awareness is key,
Mhm.
obviously, to the
Yes.
first part. Like, we talk about that a lot on the podcast. The first step is awareness.
Hmm.
And I just want to thank you, Kyle, so much for the work that you're doing, and you're holding space for these survivors to identify their identities, their emotions, and their lives. And for everybody listening, make sure you can find all of Kyle's links in the show notes, or if you're watching this over on YouTube, you They'll be below in the description box. And if you are a spiritual entrepreneur, healer, or leader navigating your own healing while building a life and business that honors your nervous system, I invite you over into the Enlightened Misfits Sisterhood, a space for grounded healing, embodiment, and aligned growth. Make sure, this is just a gentle reminder, that you are subscribed over on YouTube. You follow the podcast wherever you're listening to it so you don't miss future conversations like this. Thank you so much for being here and listening. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week, and I will see you next week. If today's episode spoke to you and you're ready to rise with support, I'd love to invite you in to the Enlightened Misfits Sisterhood, a sacred community for spiritual entrepreneurs to heal, grow, and lead with purpose. You can join us by using the link below in the show notes or connecting with me over on Facebook or Instagram at The Mermaid Light. If you loved today's episode, subscribe, share, and leave a review. This helps support us reach more women who are ready to rise. Remember, your journey isn't about fitting in. It's about embracing the truth of who you are. Until next time, stay inspired, stay aligned, and keep creating your extraordinary path. This is Lauren, and you've been listening to the Enlightened Misfits podcast.